Sensational news, the collapse of the Russian war machine. A complete failure for Putin. The Russian army is losing armor at the speed of light. More than half of their equipment reserves have simply disappeared. Russia is burning through its arsenal at the front, turning it into scrap metal instead of strengthening its army. Astronomical losses and a final blow. Germany and Ukraine united. The new weapons package detonated the bomb. The Ukrainian Vipak on takeoff has even more power, fury, and fire. More about all this later. Live to the end. Congratulations, this is Ukraine Today. Arina Taslanova, recent events. Shock. Russia has already lost more than half of its stock of armored vehicles and artillery. This is the conclusion reached by military analysts after analyzing satellite images and open data. To wage war against Ukraine, Russia has restored 4,500 tanks out of nearly 7,500. Only 19% of the pre-war number of vehicles remain in storage. Among the restored tanks, the T-80, T-72, and T-62 are mentioned most often. At the same time, the restoration of more modern models is happening much more slowly. A similar situation is observed with infantry fighting vehicles. Out of 7,000 IFVs in storage, the Russians have already restored 5,000 units. According to the researcher, this amounts to only 16% of the original stock. Artillery stockpiles have also been significantly depleted. Of the pre-war units, including mortars and anti-aircraft artillery, only about 39% of the equipment remains in storage bases. Overall, according to calculations, only 18% of Russia's rocket artillery remains in warehouses compared to pre-war levels. Researchers note that the disappearance of thousands of pieces of equipment from Russian bases is no longer a sensation, but a regular occurrence. Putin's army losses are growing like an avalanche. Armor burns under drone strikes, especially during mass attacks. BMPs and armored personnel carriers, which the occupiers relied on for their assaults, are literally vanishing from the front. At the same time, analysts are recording cases where Russians abandon military vehicles for civilian cars to launch offensives. This is attributed to a shortage of operational military equipment. Previously, analysts stated that the Russian army is running out of T-72 tanks, which had formed the backbone of Russia's tank fleet. And at the end of August, due to massive irrecoverable losses of weapons and military equipment, Russia began to demothball outdated combat vehicles on a large scale, particularly T-62 tanks. It seems Russia has no tanks left. FRF soldiers are being sent to slaughter, and the occupiers can forget about having any functional equipment. They can't even find spare parts for the old equipment, let alone put them on anything that works. This is a complete failure of Putin's war machine. Scrap metal instead of an army. Have Russian tanks really disappeared forever? All the details, watch in the report.
Russian tanks on the verge of extinction. It seems the Russian Federation can't cope, and soon they'll have nothing left to fight with at all. And it appears the reason is the sanctions.
Sanctions play a bigger role here because, after all, they restrain and worsen this growth, limit the production of certain goods that Russia manufactures, and in the long term, weaken advanced technologies like artificial intelligence that Russia could have developed.
The strong Russian economy that the Kremlin talks about is starting to show noticeable cracks.
Sooner or later, the significant overheating of the war economy may not necessarily lead to a complete collapse, but it could certainly cause a very sharp and noticeable downturn. Furthermore, the general economic trends and overall conditions within the Russian Federation will also inevitably affect the military sector of the economy quite significantly.
It would seem that, for the first time since 2022, salaries have started to fall at Russia's most important enterprises. And yes, we're talking about companies in the military-industrial complex.
Undoubtedly, lending to enterprises in the military-industrial complex has an impact. And the answer lies in the form of this lending, as well as the volume of lending to the non-military industrial sector. This used to work in their favor, but now it's working against them. In fact, having reached its peak, either wages or events have plateaued.
But how do the labor shortage and economic problems then affect the growth of Russia's military-industrial complex?
The ability of the Russian economy to supply the army, to provide for the war, equipment and ammunition. These abilities are not unlimited either, especially when it comes to rapid expansion. The modern Russian economy can potentially reach certain significant economic indicators.
Of course, this is not a game, especially when it worsens the condition and quality of military equipment, or may even completely halt its new production. But here, Soviet-era tanks come to the rescue.
The bet was placed on restoring Soviet equipment. Old Soviet equipment is being taken out of storage. Restoration would have helped, but again, both repairs and bringing them into combat readiness are not limitless.
And now the time has come when old equipment doesn't make the job easier, but rather complicates it.
There are fewer and fewer units left that can actually be repaired. We have to repair things that aren't even repairable, disassemble them, and put them together from several units. That's why it requires much more effort, work, and so on.
Thus, instead of producing new and modern equipment, Russia is increasingly using old and worn-out machinery.
The production of new equipment is hindered, yes, by sanctions among other things, as well as by the lack of readiness in manufacturing. That's precisely why the current pace of weapons production is nowhere near what Russia genuinely needs to adequately make up for its significant losses on the battlefield. Consequently, they much prefer to fund what will yield tangible and immediate results here and now, rather than investing in something that might potentially pay off tomorrow or even the day after that.
We shouldn't forget about Putin's loyal friends China and Iran. They are actually helping him a great deal.
We have always been together, yes, and we are striving to stay united even today.
But any arms supplies are more a way for Beijing to keep Moscow on a short leash.
China is also actively helping the Russians with advanced technological know-how and expertise. At the same time, the powerful Chinese are assisting Moscow from a dominant position of suzerainty. That's precisely why they meticulously keep their hand firmly on the tap. If Moscow acts in the absolutely right way, they might graciously open the tap for them.
But ultimately, what do we have as of today? It is known that in 2024, Russia's military industry has reached the limits of its capabilities. But what are Russia's prospects now?
This could be what's called a plateau. That is, when the maximum indicators have been reached. Further growth is impossible, but it is possible to prevent a decline through administrative measures.
The only question is, how long will the Kremlin be able to maintain this level? And what if it turns out that the unexpected blow comes not from the front, but from within?
Rampant corruption within Russia is, in fact, a significant and unexpected ally for our strategic objectives. The more extensively the high-ranking generals and the pivotal figures of the Russian economy and its vast military-industrial complex continue their illicit activities and systematic stealing, the less genuine chance they ultimately have of successfully maintaining their current elevated position and staying at this precarious plateau. Well, while they're stealing, they're doing pretty well for themselves. With each passing year, their appetites grow.
But of course, sanctions are just a small part of what can help Ukraine defend itself against the Russian Federation. At the same time, an important factor is the development of Ukrainian military production.
You can't just believe that sanctions will solve everything here. That is, we also need to develop our own production, which we are doing, and respond to strikes with strikes. This is one way, and sanctions are just an alternative to weapons, but not a substitute for weapons. So we need to work on both fronts.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now. And recently it became known that Russia's military spending is decreasing. For the first time since the beginning of the war. Spending on national defense in Russia will fall by almost 3 trillion rubles. And yet the government has approved a new draft budget for 2026, which some Kremlin officials have called a wartime budget. Moreover, missile cannibalism is flourishing in Russia. The occupiers are clearly having problems with the production of the K-59, as aviation expert Valery Romanenko explained.
First of all, they are forced to replace the engines on these missiles. They take engines from old missiles because new engines require higher quality components. That's why they are replacing the engines on these missiles with older modifications. Of course, this affects both the range and the speed of these missiles. In addition, one of the most important and expensive components is the homing head.
According to the expert, the occupiers rarely use the targeting of these missiles. For example, in April, 7 K-59 missiles were used against Ukraine and in June 14 units. That is, the Russians are forced to limit their use in combat conditions.
Of course, they also have problems with electronic components. Almost all of them are produced in the United States and Switzerland, But these are commercial components which are difficult to trace from the manufacturer to the end user.
But in Ukraine, it's a completely different story. The defense industry is running at full capacity. Ukraine is increasing the production of cruise missiles. Now, even more fiercely, the production capacity of Flamingo will increase several times over. What kind of fiery roasting have Ukrainian forces prepared for the enemy? Don't miss the exclusive details coming up.
A new level and scale. Ukraine is increasing the production of cruise missiles. The developers of the Ukrainian Flamingo missile have stated that the enterprise produces 50 missiles per month and plans to reach a daily output of 7 missiles by the end of the year. The company claims that scaling up is made possible by their proprietary wing manufacturing technology, which shortens the production cycle. It should be noted that the Ukrainian missile can fly up to 3,000 kilometers and carry a ton of explosives. In August, the Flamingo struck Russian targets in temporarily occupied Crimea. Early in the morning, 3 missiles were launched from the Ukrainian coast. A base of Russian border guards, which is operated by the aggressor's Federal Security Service, was hit. Additionally, the Flamingo manufacturers announced the development of their own FP-7 and FP-9 ballistic missiles, as well as air defense systems. Thanks to private companies, Ukraine can create innovations, develop them, and effectively implement them on the battlefield.
In less than a year of the full-scale invasion, the Ukrainian defense industry has made a revolutionary breakthrough in the production of Ukrainian ballistic missiles. However, the anti-ship version of the Neptune missile was modernized to strike land targets. And at the moment, as a result of improved tactical and technical characteristics according to the developers, its range can reach up to 1,000 kilometers. In addition, the Ukrainian Defense Forces are armed with the operational tactical complex RIM, which I have already mentioned, with a strike range of up to 500 kilometers. Plus, during the years of war, the Ukrainian Defense Forces have demonstrated a unique ability to modernize even Soviet-era weapon systems. I'm referring to the S-200 missile system. Also,
one of the most important developments has been missile drones, such as Palyanitsia, Peklo, Ruta, and Bars.
and accordingly, let's also mention strike drones.
The armed forces of Ukraine are actively striking military targets in the Russian Federation with the help of unmanned systems targeting oil refineries. Drone attacks have disabled up to 17% of Russia's oil refining capacity, and Ukraine is also actively working on producing interceptor drones. The Minister of Defense stated that Kyiv will soon reach the capacity to deploy at least 1,000 of these UAVs per day to defend against Russian attacks.
At this point, operating interceptor drones is a Ukrainian innovation. To understand the situation at the level of the latest provocations by the Russian Federation, specifically the violation of Polish airspace to neutralize Gerberat decoy drones, which cost $10,000 each. NATO countries' advanced air defense systems, which are incredibly sophisticated, use missiles costing a substantial $1.5 million each. Meanwhile, on the Ukrainian side, at this very moment, they are significantly scaling up the so-called tactic of swarm drones, a strategy that is proving to be quite effective. This includes the use of interceptor drones.
Ukraine is also developing a new air defense system of the air-to-air class, capable of covering large areas. All this means that Ukrainian developers have demonstrated the ability to create high-precision weapons capable of destroying important enemy military targets at long distances.
It's not just about missiles and drones, because thanks to the partnership between Germany, Berlin, and Kyiv have joined forces. Something incredible is about to hit Russia. Putin is already furious, and Germany has given an explosive gift to the Russian Federation. How could this turn the tide on the front? All the details are in the report.
Ukraine will receive 2 more Patriot systems from Germany by the end of 2025. Berlin will provide Kyiv with these modern air defense systems with the support of Norwegian partners. The strengthening of Ukraine's air defense and the supply of missiles for them were additionally discussed by Volodymyr Zelensky and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz during a meeting on the sidelines of the European Political Community Summit in Copenhagen. They also discussed the implementation of the initiative, a list of Ukraine's priority requirements, which allows the purchase of American weapons with financial support from alliance member countries. In particular, Germany has already financed the third package.
This includes, accordingly, Patriot anti-aircraft missile systems, plus missiles for the Patriots PAC-2 and PAC-3. This also includes IRIS-T systems. It should also be noted that, in addition to this, Gepards are being supplied as well. It is quite remarkable that the German side is building a layered air defense system.
Germany is the largest European donor of military aid to Ukraine, supporting the Ukrainian people so they can defend their freedom today and deter aggression in the future.
In addition to air defense systems, Germany has also supplied the Ukrainian side with armored vehicles. These include Leopard 2 tanks, specifically the Leopard 2 A6. These are among the most modern types of armored vehicles in their class. In addition to this, there is also the crucial delivery of essential infantry fighting vehicles. Furthermore, Germany, in close cooperation with its allies, is currently actively financing the vital transfer of various necessary equipment and supplies to the Ukrainian side. This refers to the self-propelled howitzer Caesar. It is also worth mentioning, accordingly, the German company Rheinmetall. This is the largest manufacturer of artillery shells in the world. It is Germany that has taken on the main responsibility for supplying 155mm caliber artillery shells.
In September, Berlin launched a new initiative to purchase long-range drones jointly with Ukraine's defense industry for 300 million euros.
It was Germany that proposed a truly innovative approach to supporting the Ukrainian defense industry and funding long-range weapons programs. First and foremost, this concerns Ukrainian ballistic missiles and the production of strike drones. The allocated amount is about $1.9 billion.
Germany has also moved to the next stage of providing military assistance to Ukraine, which involves Berlin purchasing weapons for Kyiv from Ukrainian manufacturers, as well as joint production.
Germany understands perfectly well that the plans of the Russian Federation may include expanding the theater of military operations, including on the European continent. And the first to face the threat of Russian aggression will be Germany itself. This is the Kaliningrad region, the former Prussia, which is currently temporarily part of the Russian Federation.
Since the beginning of the war, the German government has provided Ukraine with assistance totaling over 5 billion euros.
If in the year 2022 Germany spent a significant 1.6 billion euros on essential aid to Ukraine, then by the following year, 2023, this substantial amount had increased to approximately 5 billion euros. And now, in the current year, 2024, it has already reached an even more considerable figure of approximately 7.5 billion euros. They have meticulously planned comprehensive technical assistance to Ukraine totaling around 9 billion euros. Moreover, a separate and significant line item within the budget is specifically allocated for funding the crucial production of Ukraine's advanced ballistic missile program and its long-range impactful strike drones.
Germany plays a key role in NATO's collective defense, leads the alliance's forward land forces, conducts air patrols over the Baltic Sea, and also ensures maritime security by protecting critical infrastructure and strategic transport routes.
And what do you think about the latest events? Share your thoughts in the comments, like the video, and stay updated on the main news. More to come.